My life has always followed a well-structured plan aimed at ensuring a stable future. I worked hard, graduated, and got a secure job. When I met Karen at university, everything seemed to fall into place. We built a life together, had kids, and settled in Albany. It was a routine, but I felt proud of it. However, beneath the surface, I often felt that something was amiss. I pushed these doubts aside, convincing myself that this was happiness. But over time, the cracks in our lives became impossible to ignore. Today feels different, like the beginning of a new chapter. There's a heaviness in the air, and I know big changes are coming. My kids, Kate and Andrea, are the center of my world. Kate is in 3rd grade, and Andrea just started 1st grade. I'm not particularly handsome but not unattractive either. I'm 1.73 meters tall, weigh 75 kilograms, and stay in shape by running every day and cycling professionally in the summer. I'm 34, with dark brown hair and a decent smile thanks to childhood braces. I'm in good shape, and I wear glasses or contact lenses, depending on the day. Karen is also 34, a web developer, and we live in Albany, New York, a quiet yet somewhat boring town. Our life is stable, though some might call it monotonous. I blame the demands of daily life, family, work, and home, for making me such a routine-driven person. Fun is often limited to weekends and summers. This morning, as I looked in the mirror before my run, I thought, what am I going to do? I decided to talk to my friend, Jordan Walters, a lawyer who handles wills, estates, and family law. I made a note to call him after my run. I got home around 6 a.m., made coffee, showered, and got dressed. Karen and the kids were waking up, so I made their school lunches and packed breakfast. We chatted about the day ahead, including the upcoming parent-teacher conferences. Everything seemed fine. I kissed everyone goodbye, except for Kate, who now prefers a fist bump, a new habit. Then, I headed out the door to face another day in my wonderfully predictable life. The day of the parent-teacher conference coincided with an in-person meeting I had scheduled with Jordan. We hadn't seen each other in months, so we arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our offices. After ordering coffee, I got straight to the point. Jordan, I need your advice. I have a serious problem with Karen. Jordan was surprised. Karen, your wife of 9 years, the mother of your 2 kids. I nodded, taking a bite of cake. Yes, she is. It seems she's involved with someone else. I'm not sure how long it's been going on, but I don't know what to do. I need your advice, both as a lawyer and as a friend. Jordan took a deep breath and said, Mark, you're in a tough spot. Legally, getting divorced could be challenging in New York. The law tends to favor the wife, especially regarding child custody. Unless you can prove she's unfit, she'll likely get custody of the kids and the house. You'll also be responsible for child support until they're 21, as well as spousal support, and possibly the mortgage. He paused and continued, let me give you a quick rundown of New York divorce law. There are 7 grounds for divorce, the most common being the irreparable breakdown of the marriage for at least 6 months. For this, the marriage must have lasted at least 6 months, and all financial and custody matters must be resolved. Then there's cruel and inhuman treatment, requiring proof of severe cruelty within the last 5 years. Simple arguments aren't enough, the cruelty must be so extreme that it's unsafe to continue living together. Then there's imprisonment, which applies if a spouse has been imprisoned for 3 or more consecutive years. Infidelity is also grounds but can be difficult to prove, as it requires evidence from someone other than the spouses involved. Legal separation can also lead to divorce if the couple lives apart for a year under a valid separation agreement. Finally, there's divorce by decree, though it's rarely used. The court issues a separation decree, and the couple must live apart for a year before applying for divorce on this ground. As Jordan spoke, I realized how complicated and difficult this situation was going to be. The legal landscape was overwhelming, and the personal cost even more unbearable. My eyes began to blur as Jordan continued explaining divorce in New York. So, Mark, if you want a divorce, your main options are to cite irreparable breakdown or infidelity, Jordan said in a firm, analytical tone. Proving infidelity will require solid evidence, either Karen admits to the affair, or someone else confirms it. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation settle on my shoulders. Jordan continued, the irreparable breakdown of your marriage is the most common reason people use, but think carefully before deciding. I was speechless. Jordan sensed my hesitation and softened his tone. All right, that's the legal side. Now, let me talk to you as a friend. I looked at him, desperate for any hope that my life wasn't falling apart. Mark, you need to figure out what you really want, he said. I want my family, my wife, my kids, and our life together, I replied with a voice tinged with desperation. I understand, Jordan nodded, but you have to decide what's more important, your family or your pride. What are you saying? I asked, confused. I see people all the time who go scorched earth, sacrificing everything just to hurt the other person. But they end up hurting themselves and their kids even more, Jordan explained, his words cutting through the fog of my thoughts. Divorce could make you a part-time parent, with limited time with your kids. Karen will probably get custody, and you'll be on the sidelines. I was stunned. The thought of being a weekend dad and missing out on daily life with my kids was unbearable. What am I going to do, Jordan? I asked in a barely audible voice. Jordan looked at me with a mix of sadness and realism. I have a suggestion, but it might sound strange. Go ahead. What is it? I insisted, anxious for any solution. It's simple, do nothing, Jordan said, surprising me. Go home and pretend you don't know anything. Keep living your life as usual. Enjoy your family, play with your kids, love your wife. Do nothing. I repeated, unsure if I'd heard him right. Yes, do nothing, and you'll never have to see it again, Jordan advised. He suggested that if I hadn't known about Karen's affair before, and if she'd been a great wife and mother, maybe I could choose to ignore it for the sake of the family. I started to protest, saying it wasn't possible, but Jordan interrupted. That decision is only yours. You need to weigh how much you value your family against what you've discovered. We finished our now cold coffees, and the waitress gave us a look, hinting it was time to either order more or pay and leave so she could clear the table. I sighed deeply, I needed time to think this through. Jordan stood up, and I followed. We each left a tip. As we parted, Jordan said, I have to get back to the office. Call me whenever you want to talk. Let's meet for a beer on Friday, and you can tell me what you think by then. Until then, promise me you won't do anything. Agreed? I promise. Thanks for listening and for the advice. I have a million things to figure out, I replied, grateful for his support. We went our separate ways, and I walked back to my office, trying not to get hit by a car. On the way home, I followed Jordan's advice and pretended everything was normal. I kissed my wife, talked to my kids, and we had dinner together. Karen was her usual self, and we spent the evening just like always. Later, after the kids were in their rooms, I found myself looking at Karen and remembering all the things I loved about her, her smile, her figure, the way she moved. I still loved her deeply. From the moment I met her, I knew she was the person I wanted to spend my life with, the mother of my children. So, what happened? I wondered. How did we get here? Looking at us, no one would guess there was a problem. We seemed and acted like a loving, normal family. We held hands, kissed, and the kids came to us for everything. We were a close team. Walking through the house, I felt like I was part of a family, part of the world. I admired all the projects Karen had completed. She was amazing at decorating and renovating, tirelessly improving our home, doing everything from painting to custom furniture, even bathroom renovations, with me as her helper. How did she find time for an affair? I thought bitterly. Sometimes, I barely have time to go to the bathroom. My wife was a master of deception, but that's how I knew she was seeing someone else. One day, at work, she was meeting with clients at the Hilton Hotel and needed a break. On her way back, a taxi stopped, and out came a well-dressed man, followed by a woman who looked like she was about to have an affair. As they entered the hotel, he took her hand, and they headed to the elevator. I moved quickly, almost catching up. I stood there, stunned for 10 minutes, trying to process what I had just seen. My chest tightened, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I sat down until someone from our meeting passed by and asked if I was coming back in. I returned to the meeting, but I didn't hear a word. Fortunately, the meeting minutes were recorded, so I didn't ruin the contract. After the meeting, I hurried home, expecting to find Karen packing to leave, but she was there, busy with the kids and preparing dinner. She greeted me as she always did. That was a few weeks ago, and since then, thoughts of Karen have haunted me. How could I have been so blind? I was mentally devastated. That was when I decided I needed a plan and turned to Jordan for help. When Mark came to me, I knew his life was about to change. I understood that he had to act, despite my warning about the impact it would have on him and the kids. But the key was to prioritize what was most important and focus on that first. For Mark, his kids were the top priority, so he chose to tolerate Karen's other life. I wanted a clearer picture before telling Mark because knowing everything could destroy him. They say time heals all wounds, but I'm not sure if that's true. Still, I managed to swallow my pride and pretend I didn't know anything. It's strange, if I hadn't seen Karen get in the elevator, maybe I'd never have known. Karen still appears the same on the outside, a wonderful mother who cares deeply for our children, organized and hardworking. She's still the woman I married 10 years ago, but now, she isn't. I'm still not sure what to do. Should I confront her and throw her out? Should we try to rebuild our marriage? Should we go to couples counseling? And what if she wants to leave me? And what about the kids? What if Karen is in love with this guy and wants to leave us for him? I feel lost. That's where Jordan comes in. He's my ace in the hole to help me navigate this mess. I've assigned my investigator, Wolfie, to take on the case. Her name is Wolfie, her real name is Hannah Wolfenstein, but everyone calls her Wolfie. She's a former NYPD detective who retired due to a knee injury. In her early 30s, she's tall, blonde, slender, and very attractive, making her excellent at blending into any situation. She also has top-notch tech skills and rarely disappoints. I called Wolfie to my office, and when she arrived, I couldn't help but feel a strong attraction to her. She has that effect on men. Her knee is mostly healed, so she moves without any noticeable issues. After offering her a cup of coffee, we got down to business. "So, what's the job?" she asked. "I have a case involving an unfaithful wife, one of my best friend's wives," I replied, handing her a folder with all the information we had on Karen, including details about her job, addresses, phone numbers, car information, and a brief biography. I handled the basic legal aspects, but Wolfie specializes in more intrusive investigations, including financial tracking. I explained, her husband saw her at the downtown Hilton. I need to know what she's doing, who she's with, and for how long. This information will help her husband decide on a possible divorce and ensure he has the upper hand in a custody battle. Wolfie nodded and took notes. I was confident she would uncover what Karen was up to. She then said, "You know I don't work for free. I'll get back to you in 2 days with a detailed estimate. Is that all right?" "It's fine. My client is patient, but he wants information before taking any steps. We'll talk in 2 days." Wolfie gathered the files, slipped them into her bag, and stood up. I worried that my attraction had been obvious and that she had noticed. When she reached the door, she paused and turned slightly. "Remember, you still owe me dinner," she said. "How could I forget?" I replied. She glanced briefly at me and smiled. I can't stand women who think they can deceive their husbands and get away with it. I've seen too many of these entitled women betray the hardworking men who provide for them. My client is a dedicated family man who was shocked when he accidentally saw his wife and daughter in the hallway, I continued, summarizing the case. He's not ready to throw her out, but he wants to know what's really going on and what his options are. He hopes to keep his family together, if possible, but everyone has their limits. I need to find out who Karen Francis really is, I said. I suspect this isn't her first time. Either she's gotten careless in hiding her infidelity, or this is her first mistake. I'm not sure yet, but I'll find out, Wolfie replied. I'll send Jordan my estimate, and once he approves it, I'll get started. Later, Jordan called to tell me that his investigator had finished the report. I was desperate, hoping there was an innocent explanation for what I had seen. But when I arrived at Jordan's office, his serious expression told me otherwise. Mark, Jordan began, Wolfie found a lot of information. I'll let her explain, but your suspicions were correct. Karen is involved with another man. I turned toward the investigator, feeling a sinking sensation in dread. Mr. Francis, Wolfie said, I began investigating your wife as soon as Jordan informed me. Unfortunately, I discovered that Karen is indeed involved with another man. She continued, I found out that Karen had been seeing another man for some time. I felt sick and rushed to the bathroom to vomit. When I returned, Jordan and Hannah were there, helping me calm down. After taking a few deep breaths, I decided to continue. Better to end this quickly than to drag it out. We did some online searches, Hannah continued, but there's very little information about her online since she's careful to control her internet presence as a web developer. All she has is a Facebook page, and it's very family-oriented, photos of you, the kids, and typical family activities. I looked at her, confused. We checked her Facebook friends for any suspicious profiles but didn't find any. However, it's possible she's using a fake account on a device you don't know about. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, we used some traditional methods. We put a tracking device on her car and monitored her movements. The first week, we tracked her usual locations, work, home, the kids' school, and the grocery store. Then we decided when and where to follow her more closely. Oh, my God. The second week, we installed a listening device in her car that recorded conversations. From this, we learned that she was meeting with a man named Thomas Murray. Do you know him? I shook my head. No, Thomas Murray is a corporate attorney working on a project for the New York State Comptroller's office. He's married to Brittany Murray, and they live here in Albany with their daughter, Allison. Hannah showed me photos of Thomas, his wife, his daughter, and their house. Do any of these seem familiar? I shook my head again. Not really. When I saw Karen, I was focused on her, not him. We learned from surveillance that Karen had planned to meet Murray at a hotel last Wednesday. We were there and took these photos of them together. She handed me pictures of Karen holding hands with him. Hannah allowed me to absorb the information before continuing. After identifying Mr. Murray, we ran a thorough background check. The world started spinning again, and Jordan handed me a paper bag, telling me to breathe into it, which helped a bit. Hannah looked at Jordan for confirmation on whether to continue. I looked at her and said, "Go ahead," before taking a sip of water. We reviewed university records and found that Mr. Murray was in his third year when Mrs. Francis was a freshman. Mr. Murray then went to law school in North Carolina, where he met his future wife and married her around the time he graduated. Their daughter was born about 6 months after the wedding. So, he got her pregnant. I concluded, and Hannah confirmed. Yes. When did Karen start seeing him again? I asked. We're not completely sure, but we discovered that he has a separate bank account, probably hidden from his wife, which he uses to pay for a hotel room almost every week, Hannah continued. Does Karen have a secret bank account too? I asked. Hannah hesitated before answering. Yes, she does. It's at a credit union near her office, with about $40,000 in it. I was stunned by the amount of money she had stashed away. Did you ask her if she had a secret bank account? Yes, Hannah replied. How did she get that kind of money? I do our taxes, and we save, but not like that. She's been diverting part of her salary to this account, around 25%, and she also has a separate credit card and a second phone that she uses to contact Mr. Murray, Hannah explained. Oh my God, I exclaimed. My wife is living a double life, I murmured. Then Jordan said, Mark, there's more you need to know, and this is the hardest part. How could this get any worse? I asked, stunned. Looking more disheartened than I had ever seen him, Jordan instructed, Go ahead, Wolfie. Tell him. Yes, sir, she replied. It's a long-term affair. Last year, DNA samples of your children were taken for security reasons. We accessed their DNA and compared it with yours and Mrs. Francis's. Karen is their mother, but you are not their biological father. That's impossible. I exclaimed. Jordan stepped in. Mark, I know it's hard to believe, but we took your DNA from a coffee cup here, and you're not their biological father. My world collapsed. I couldn't breathe, and the room was spinning until I had to lie down on the floor while Hannah explained the DNA results. My entire reality shattered. I had an unfaithful wife and no biological children. Hannah provided me with a detailed written report and a flash drive with a copy for Jordan's files in case of divorce. I asked Hannah, have you been able to find out who the children's biological father is? She nodded. I suspect it's Thomas Murray, Hannah said, exchanging a glance with Jordan before continuing. We believe he's the biological father. All right, do it. I don't care how you get it, just find out. We finished, and Hannah packed her things, handing the file to Jordan. As she prepared to leave, she said, Mr. Francis, despite everything, it seems Mrs. Francis still cares deeply for you. Think carefully before acting. And one last piece of advice, don't do anything that could land you in jail. It won't help. She signaled to Jordan to join her in the hallway. They spoke quietly for a moment, and she touched his shoulder a few times before giving Jordan a kiss on the cheek and leaving. I assumed they were close, maybe with some shared history. I can't believe how much joy Tommy brings me. He's so good at it. You might think it's unusual to be married and have a lover. For me, it's normal. It's common for married people to love someone else. It happens more often than you'd think. But I still love Mark, and I love Tommy too, Karen had said. I was in love with Tommy before we were both married, before he married Brittany and before I married Mark. When Tommy met Brittany in law school and got her pregnant, he did the right thing and married her. That's when our relationship ended. Then I met Mark. We started dating, I fell in love, and we've been together for years, Karen continued. We got married, but when Tommy and I reconnected, our relationship rekindled. We still loved each other, but we had other commitments now. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop seeing Tommy. I loved Mark as my husband, but Tommy felt like my true love. So we started seeing each other once a week. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. Mark was thrilled about becoming a father, though I wasn't sure if the baby was his or Tommy's. At that moment, it didn't matter. My pregnancy only intensified my feelings, and I couldn't get enough of either Mark or Tommy. After Kate was born, Tommy and I paused our affair. Mark naturally assumed the role of father and became an incredible dad, working all day and still coming home ready to help so I could rest. When Kate was about a year old, I became pregnant with Andrea. Those 3 years were challenging but wonderful. Mark was my hero, he made family life a joy. My time with Tommy, though, was the escape I needed. He made me feel fulfilled in a way that Mark, despite being an amazing husband and father, couldn't. It wasn't that Mark wasn't enough, it was just that with Tommy, I felt an excitement I didn't experience with anyone else. I know I'm playing with fire, but I'm careful. Mark is too busy with work and the kids to suspect anything. I keep things normal at home, giving him no reason to doubt me. I love Mark and don't want to hurt him, but I can't give up Tommy. He's my secret, my escape, and I need him. I asked Jordan to drive me home in my car, and he took a taxi back to his office. Once inside the house, everything felt unfamiliar. I wandered around, as if seeing everything for the first time. I walked into Kate and Andrea's bedrooms, remembering all the bedtime stories and the times I'd taken care of them. I wondered how Karen could lie to me for so long. If she didn't want to have children with me, why didn't she tell me? Why did we even get married? We'd painted and redecorated the kids' rooms multiple times, first as nurseries, then as they started school, adding desks, changing colors, letting them help pick the furniture. In the family room, I looked at the walls lined with framed photos of us as a family, vacation pictures, and formal family photos taken at Christmas, documenting our children's growth and our family's story. Why did she have to ruin it all? I asked myself. Why did she turn our marriage into a lie? Why did she take away what mattered most to me? I used to love her, but now I feel a deep sense of betrayal. Why was she so cruel? I had no idea what to do next. After her meeting with Tommy, Karen arrived home just before I returned. She would always shower after seeing Tommy, using a tracking app on her phone to monitor my whereabouts, especially when I was out. With Tommy, our connection was focused on the physical. I love Mark, and deep down, I know Tommy loves Brittany. Getting pregnant wasn't in Tommy's plans, but he accepted it and married Brittany. She's a good person, and they have a solid relationship. Tommy and I share the same need for passion, something we can't always find time for at home. Don't get me wrong, Mark is a wonderful partner and knows how to make me feel loved, but our intimate life often follows the rhythm of family life. We're usually intimate a few times a week, mostly on weekends. Why do I have Tommy as a lover when my intimate life with Mark is so good? The answer is simple, I want him. I crave the attention Tommy gives me. We were a couple before Mark and Brittany. I was in love with him then, and I still am. Tommy got Brittany pregnant and married her, so I moved on and married Mark. Mark is a wonderful man, kind, loyal, hardworking, and an amazing father. He does everything for me. So why isn't it enough? Why do I still want Tommy? Mark gives me love, respect, and stability. He's an ideal husband and father, thoughtful and attentive, and we have a deep connection. But I also have a deep connection with Tommy. The way I feel when I'm with him is something I can't let go of. He brings out a side of me that I don't experience with Mark, sometimes intense and wild, other times slow and gentle. Our time together is just for us, away from the pressures of family and work. Afterward, we compose ourselves, get dressed, and return to our separate lives. Before leaving Tommy, I always check my phone to see where Mark is. I want to avoid any casual encounters that would be hard to explain. This routine has worked well for years, and I don't plan on changing it. It's been almost 2 weeks since Jordan and Hannah revealed what Karen had been doing throughout our marriage. I feel so foolish. I was so used to believing that she loved me all this time. We shared a life, a family, a home, and a future, or so I thought. In an instant, my hopes and dreams vanished, as did my marriage. When I look at Karen, I still see the woman I married, sweet, charming, beautiful, talented, hardworking, and a wonderful mother. But our children are not truly ours, they're hers and Thomas Murray's. I have no biological children. I feel completely betrayed and have no one to talk to about it. 3 days ago, I had a drink with Jordan, and he suggested I see a psychologist. He even made an appointment for me to see if it would help. In recent weeks, I've noticed that Mark has been very distracted. I have to repeat myself several times before he listens and understands. He barely pays attention to the kids. Andrea has to physically pull his hand to get his attention. He apologizes for not listening, but within minutes, he drifts back into his own world. He seems to be spending much more time at work and has missed school meetings we were supposed to attend together, leaving me to go alone. He gets up very early in the morning and goes for a run. He used to run for about 45 minutes and then come home to shower, but lately, he's been running for an hour and a half before coming back. He barely eats lunch. Mark met with his psychologist, Dr. Marilyn Snow, a lovely woman in her 60s with a calm and reassuring demeanor. I explained my situation and how it made me feel. She asked if I had any plans for the future, what I intended to do. I told her I was still trying to come up with a plan, and I mentioned that my friend and lawyer, Jordan, had advised me not to take any action until I was certain of my decision. Dr. Snow agreed that this was a reasonable short-term approach but asked about my long-term plans. I knew that if the betrayal had been brief, I might have been able to forgive her, but discovering that she never stopped seeing her true lover and that he was the father of her children was a devastating blow. How could I trust her again? If I accepted the situation as it was, I'd have to live with the knowledge that I was her second choice, that I was raising someone else's children, and that she had betrayed me throughout our life together. If Murray and his wife divorced, Karen might leave with him. How could I ever be happy again, knowing what I now know? More than a month had passed since I last saw Mark, and today he wanted to meet with me at my office. I greeted him at the door, and we went straight to the meeting room. Mark took off his jacket, and I handed him a bottle of water, which he opened and sipped. "What do you want to talk about today?" Jordan asked, sensing the tension in Mark's voice. "I've been seeing the psychologist you recommended, and she's helped me see things from a different angle. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I think I've made some decisions." "All right. How can I help?" I asked, sensing the gravity of what he was about to say. Mark began outlining his plan in detail. It was direct and simple, but there were some specific points that needed careful attention. Mark had already met with his banker and had a lengthy discussion with his employer. Now, everything depended on these details and timing. "I'll need Wolfie's help to execute the plan," Mark added. 2 weeks later, I found myself in Dubai, overwhelmed by the intense heat after a long journey, a train from Albany to New York, subway to JFK, an 18-hour flight with Air France, and a 4-hour layover in Paris. Finally, I arrived in the United Arab Emirates, specifically Dubai, my new temporary home. I secured a job with a British engineering firm working on a major project in Dubai. In our field, engineers are constantly in demand worldwide, and sometimes it's beneficial to relocate for a specific project. This was one of those times. The work will be demanding, but the rewards are worth it. My base salary is around $25,000 a month, with excellent benefits and no income tax. I don't plan to stay more than 2 years since the culture here doesn't align with my long-term goals, but that might change. My only goal is to work hard and save as much as possible. The climate will take some time to adjust to, especially coming from upstate New York. The job includes an ultramodern apartment in a skyscraper with underground parking and a fast black Mercedes E450, very different from my old Subaru Outback in Albany. The company also assigned me an assistant, Amanda, a well-educated British woman in her 20s, who met me at the airport and drove me to the apartment. Amanda's knowledge of the local culture and language will be invaluable. I only brought my old leather briefcase and a suitcase, deciding to buy everything else I needed here. During the drive, Amanda chatted non-stop, alternating between praise and constructive criticism, making me realize that this job would be both challenging and possibly enjoyable. When I left Albany, I knew that chaos would follow, but that was no longer my concern. Karen and her boyfriend could handle it themselves. I felt sorry for the kids, but I knew no judge would allow me to take them from their mother. My meeting with Mark lasted a couple of hours. He brought notes and a folder of documents to discuss, asking me to coordinate some things for him. This was the end for Karen Francis and Thomas Murray. Hannah had found out where Karen and Murray met every week, sometimes at a small hotel near a FedEx facility, other times at the airport. Mark told me he planned to pack his things in the morning and go to the train station to leave the country without revealing his destination. He'd return after dropping the kids off at school and waiting for Karen to leave for work. When he got back home, he would gather his belongings and call a taxi. That's where Wolfie came in. She had a package of documents for Karen, ready to be delivered while she and Murray were likely in the hotel room, probably in the midst of their affair. The plan was for Wolfie to knock on the door, posing as the police, and ask them to open up. Once they did, she'd ask Karen for her ID, take a photo, and hand over the documents. My next task was to wait for Wolfie's call confirming the delivery and then contact Brittany Murray. I would need her identification, a photograph, and a package containing the usual items, a summons, a statement, divorce papers, DNA test results proving that Mark was not the father of the children, transcripts of phone calls between Karen and Murray, and incriminating photographs. Mark had considered suing Murray to recover the money he'd spent raising Kate and Andrea but didn't want to cause additional pain to Brittany and her daughter. Mark called me yesterday to tell me that today was the day he would leave his old life behind. Wolfie was thrilled when she arrived, and I smiled, asking why she was so excited. She grinned. This woman is about to face the consequences of betraying a man who dedicated his life to her and to children he thought were his own. She deserves everything coming her way. We sat in the conference room, packed everything into large envelopes, and labeled them. After some coffee and a chat, Wolfie went to check on Karen's workplace. Later that afternoon, she called to tell me Karen was on the move. All I had to do was be ready to call Brittany. I parked in the hotel's lot and saw Tommy's SUV parked to the side. I parked and got out, meeting him at the side entrance of the hotel. He already had the room key. I kissed him, and we held hands as we entered and took the elevator. Once in the room, we began undressing and tossed the sheets off the bed. I wanted him immediately. Barely dressed, I quickly entered the hotel with Tommy. Mark had barely spoken to me in the past few weeks, and I was desperate for Tommy. The feeling of his hands on my skin was electric. Near the bed, he pulled me close, kissing my neck and shoulders, his hands firm on my body. We moved to the bed, where Tommy started kissing my chest and stomach. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on the door, and a voice called, "Miss Karen Francis, I know you're in there. Open the door." We froze, looking at each other, then at the door. "What on earth?" I whispered. "Miss Francis, open the door, or hotel security will do it." Tommy hurried to find his clothes while I grabbed whatever I could and started dressing. The knocking continued. "Open the door now," the voice warned. Wait, I'm opening it," I called out. Tommy opened the door but kept the latch on. We heard, "Mr. Murray, open the door fully, or we'll do it ourselves." Tommy looked at me, saw that I was almost dressed, and then unlocked the door. A woman with a badge entered and looked at me. "Are you Miss Karen Francis?" she asked. I nodded. "I need a verbal yes or no, please." "Oh, yes," I replied. She approached me and asked for my identification. I found my purse and handed her my driver's license. She took a photo of it with her phone and handed me a large envelope. "You've been served with a summons." She then turned to Tommy, handed him an envelope, and said, "Mr. Thomas Murray, you've been served with a summons." She quickly took a photo of both of us and left. "What the hell was that?" Tommy asked, stunned. I looked at the envelope and realized my world had just collapsed. Mark had discovered Tommy and me. His silence over the past few weeks suddenly made sense. The room started spinning, and I nearly fainted. The next thing I remembered, I was lying on the bed, with Tommy sitting on a chair, looking at his phone. I got up, ran to the bathroom, and threw up. I gathered my things. I have to go home, I said, without looking at Tommy. Somehow, I made it home without causing an accident. Once inside, I called out for Mark. Mark, where are you? Panic filled my voice as I searched the house, but he wasn't there. I returned to the kitchen and noticed a white envelope on the counter with my name on it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and Mark's wedding ring. Fear washed over me as I unfolded the note. Karen, you know I've discovered the truth about your long-term affair with Thomas Murray. I know you had a relationship with him before we got married, and if you haven't read the documents you were given, you should see that I know I'm not the father of Kate and Andrea Murray. What hurts most is not being the father of the children I loved and raised. Your deception has destroyed everything, and I will never forgive you. As for our future paths, I am gone. I took little with me, leaving the house and everything else for you to decide. Jordan has more paperwork for you. I've renounced my claim on the house and our possessions. You're probably wondering how I discovered your affair with Murray. It was pure chance. I was in the same hotel where you two met, and during a break, I saw you and him enter an elevator together. I saw you kiss him, with the same look on your face that I thought was reserved for me when I believed you loved me. How wrong I was. I'll never contact you again, so you can move on with your life, and I can move on with mine. I'm sorry that Kate and Andrea will suffer the most. Perhaps they'll come to know their true father, and he'll be good to them. I will truly miss them. Goodbye, Mark. I dropped the letter and collapsed. I had never tested the children's DNA but knew they were Tommy's as their features grew more like his over time. What have I done? Jordan sent me an email with an update on how the discovery of Karen's affair was unfolding. It was difficult, but I knew my life with her was over. I could never trust that she truly loved me. I was her second choice. I learned that Ray was the father of the children. I've been in Lozo for a month now and am mostly settled in. I called my parents to explain what had happened. Although they were saddened, they understood that I couldn't accept Karen's betrayal. I'm still young, and they assured me that I'd find someone new to share my life with. The situation with Thomas Murray and his wife Brittany was tense. Brittany called me and later came to my office, where I told her everything about her husband's long-term affair with Karen. Karen also came by, demanding to know where Mark was, but I genuinely didn't know, so I didn't have to lie. I had her sign the divorce papers and a special request from Mark to have his name removed from Kate and Andrea's birth certificates and replaced with Thomas Murray's. After some negotiations with the judge and the presentation of DNA results, the court approved the request. Life here in Lozo is going well so far, but being a single mother is harder than I expected. Now I have to do everything for the kids and manage the household alone, without Mark. There's no one to share the workload with. My dad comes over to do minor repairs that Mark used to handle. My parents found out why Mark left. They knew I loved Tommy before Mark, but they assumed it had ended when Tommy married Brittany. They had no idea I had been seeing Tommy the whole time. The house and most of our savings are mine, but I still need to work and pay the bills. The court ruled that Mark isn't financially responsible for the kids, since they aren't his, and I had kept that from him. As for my finances, the money in the bank is mine to use as I wish, and I still have my not-so-secret bank account that Mark knew about. I've really messed up. What am I supposed to do now? 6 months later, life has moved on. I miss not having the kids, but thinking about Karen just makes me so angry at her and at myself for letting our marriage fall apart. So, I keep busy to distract myself. My social life is slowly picking up again. I've met a lot of people at work. Many are here for different reasons: money, a new cultural experience, or to recover from something. Last month, I took a motorcycle adventure through the desert to an oasis. I bought a used BMW F800 GS and joined a local motorcycle club for weekend rides. Amanda mentioned she wanted to try something like that, so I invited her. It was her first time on a motorcycle and my first as a passenger. We had a great time. The organizer was a good friend of mine, and we all enjoyed the trip. When we arrived, there was only one room with a bed available, and the hotel was fully booked. We had to share it. At first, it was awkward, but we managed. I offered to sleep on the floor, but she insisted we share the bed. In the morning, I woke up holding her waist, not intentionally, but that's how it happened. The awkward part was that I felt a bit flustered, which was unexpected and made things slightly uncomfortable. Amanda was still asleep but began to shift, and her body brushed against mine. I quickly got out of bed and went to the bathroom before things became even more awkward. When I came out, she was getting dressed without a bra, and her movements caught my attention. She noticed and jokingly said, "Haven't you seen a half-dressed woman before?" Then she took off her shirt and went to the bathroom. I was so embarrassed that she hadn't told me what she was doing. I heard the water running and then, "Are you coming or not?" That was the start of everything that followed. Mark and I later returned to London to visit my parents, who had met him the previous Christmas when we were on vacation here. My father, a banker, and my mother, a teacher, are financially secure and nearing retirement. They were curious about the American I was bringing home. My father wanted to get to know Mark better, so they went to the local pub for a beer and a chat. A few hours later, they returned, and my father was smiling, clearly more at ease. It's now summer, and we've come back with big news. Mark and I are moving to the United Kingdom. It's his first time living here. He has a new job on a large construction project in the Cotswolds, the pay is excellent, and we plan to rent a house at first and maybe buy one in a few years. We want a place with at least 3 bedrooms, and I'd prefer 2 bathrooms so we don't have to share with guests. I know it sounds selfish, but the other big news is that I'm pregnant, due in November. So, we want to settle down, handle the medical matters, and yes, get married. Mark proposed, and I said yes. I've been searching for Mark online almost every day since he left. I still have the letter he left in the kitchen. The kids were devastated because the father they knew disappeared without a word. What could I even say? "Sorry, kids, I'm not really your dad, but your mom's a liar, so I'm leaving." That wouldn't go over well. I know I caused this mess. I've started seeing a therapist weekly and will continue as long as my insurance covers it. She says I've been lying to myself, thinking I could have both men without consequences, and that I let Mark down. She advised me to apologize to Mark and the kids. I would if I could find him. I can't afford a private investigator, so I occasionally reach out to his family for help. But Mark's father tells me to go to hell, and his mother ignores me. We've moved to a smaller, more affordable house, though the kids don't like it, and I'm driving Mark's old Subaru, which is still reliable. I've tried hard to forget the time when I thought I was the happiest person in the world, but everything changed the day my ex-wife had that chance encounter with her lover. Without it, I might never have known the truth. But I discovered it, and I had to act. 10 years of deception were too much. How can someone lie to you every day, say they love you while betraying you, and give your love to someone else? How can you lie to your own children? I'm not perfect, and some may criticize how I handled Karen's betrayal, but it was the only way I could stay true to myself. My greatest regret is for the kids, Katie and Andrea. I hope they get to know their real father and that he loves them as much as I did. Karen destroyed my love, she poisoned it. I couldn't look at Kate and Andrea knowing they were born of deceit. They deserve better. I'll do everything I can to be a good father to my own child. My actions were drastic. I thought Mark might regret leaving the kids, even though they weren't biologically his. He was there at their births, he raised them, changed their diapers, fed them, and witnessed their first words. He was their father, but I saw a friend deeply hurt by the betrayal of the woman who promised to love him. Her betrayal couldn't have been worse unless he had retaliated violently. I understand why Mark left, and as his friend and lawyer, I supported him. Karen still calls, asking where he is or begging him to come home. I forwarded some messages until Mark told me to stop, so I did. Every few months, I receive a short email from Mark, updating me on his life. I know he's leaving Lozo for the United Kingdom and that he has a new wife named Amanda. I promised not to tell Karen. I'm happy for Mark. He set up an education fund for Katie and Andrea for when they go to college, and I'll make sure they receive it. As for me, I'm married to Wolfie, though my family knows her as Hannah. She's pregnant, and we're expecting a baby in December. We've decided to drop the nickname before our child is old enough to understand it.